Hi, everybody.
Good morning.
Thanks for that. Okay. Let me just, let's see if I can try this. Seem to have our usual crowd here this morning. Oops, it's gonna close. I'm gonna try something real quick and see if you can see my, I wanna know if you can see my pointer. Can you see my pointer here? Anybody?
No, I can't.
Nothing? Okay.
No.
Shoot. Okay. I still don't know what's going on with that. I keep trying new solutions, but I haven't solved that one yet. So I'm just going to give the, I'll give my, the lecture slides in the sorter format. It's all right. I make the slides, I try to make all the pictures as big as possible, so hopefully you'll be able to see everything well anyway. Can I move this closer? Yes, good. Something like that. So how's the lab going? Has everybody tried a little bit of the relative age dating puzzles that I gave you? Puzzles, kind of. They are kind of puzzles. Do you run into any problems? Do you have any questions about how it works? It's today that I'm going to talk about all of the different stratigraphy rules that apply when you're looking at an outcrop, which is kind of what those sketches are. And here I'll just go down to one so I'll talk about it for a second, and then here I'll do one. Here's a simple one, relatively simple. Okay, so what you are looking at is, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more. Okay. What you're looking at is like a cross section of rock. Imagine, just the rock got blasted away and there's a highway going through right here. And you look to your left and see these relations between different units. We call different rock types are usually called a unit. So the number one down here would be 1 unit, and these are all supposed to be sedimentary strata. So this might be...
Professor?
Yes.
Is the screen supposed to be shared? Because we can't see the screen.
Yes. Sorry about that. Oh my God. Okay. Yes, it is. No, don't apologize. That was me being a dope. Okay. Where's my share screen thing? Oh, there it is. Share. Okay, there we go. Okay, so let's get a warm up and wake up your brains this morning. This is in the middle of the lecture, but that's okay. We can look at a different one then or something. Okay, so we've got 4 different units here, numbered 1 through 4. Number 1 might be like sandstone. These might be sand dune layers where you're seeing the sand come down the steep face of a sand dune that's preserved in the rock. And let's say this is a shale unit, and this is another sandstone, but it's got this conglomerate at the bottom. And this is a different colored sandstone with a different conglomerate at the bottom. Conglomerate meaning, that means there are larger chunks of rock that have been transported along with the sand, for example, and the bottom layer is going to have the coarsest material because it's heaviest and falls out of the water column, or if it's wind blown, the heaviest stuff doesn't move very far, so it's at the bottom too. So we can imagine that. And then we've got a couple of intrusions. You might call these, they're called intrusive igneous rock body. We could call this it might be a granite, for example. This might be a granite dike, which is the word we call for an intrusion that crosses different strata. And here's another one. This is actually a pipe, a volcanic pipe that leads to this like basaltic lava flow. So a few different things going on. And the question is and if you've done the reading in the textbook, you'll have already read through these, but why not try using some intuition to start? Which is the oldest layer?
Isn't it 1?
Yes. Why do you think so?
Because it's at the bottom.
Yeah, because it's at the bottom. So one of the principles that we'll talk about today is the principle of superposition, meaning that each successive layer of sedimentary rock has to be younger than the one that was deposited before it, basically. So number 1 is oldest. Number 2, what's next? Is it number 3? How are you going to decide of the last 4 units? Number 3, number 4, intrusion B, or intrusion A? They've given you ages, 20 million years. Okay, so these were dated. We can assume that, let's say we collected samples and those have radiometric ages. So we know that this basaltic lava flow is 20 million years old, and this intrusive rock body is 34 million years old. Is 3 older or younger than those?
3 is older than B
Why do you think so?
because B is cutting through it, so it must have existed already to be cut through.
Exactly. So that's one of these rules about cross-cutting relationships. So if you've got layers of rock that are already laid down, and whatever it is, it might be an intrusion, it might be a fault, whatever cuts across those layers has to be younger than the layers that it cuts across. Exactly. Okay, so what's next? Is it 4? Is 4 older or younger than the lava flow A? Somebody
Older?
older.
Sorry.
It's okay. You jumped in there too fast. It's the same principle. I was expecting the same answer, really. Okay, so B came before 4 because B does not cross-cut 4. 4 is laid down on top of B, or across B. So 4 has to be the next oldest, and then the youngest unit is lava flow A. Good. Okay, so we would call these, so this is a volcanic unit. It was actually erupted onto Earth's surface, so that's a lava flow. But this one here, B, it's intrusive, which means it's a plutonic type igneous rock, meaning I think it comes from the god Pluto, which is the underworld. And so they're hot rocks. They're coming from deep in the earth, and they're called plutonic. So these look different. These are coarser grained, so that you can see the minerals within them compared to the lava flow. The lava flow cools quickly, and so the crystals don't have a lot of time to grow very large. So those will look pretty different too. Okay. All right, that's a good warm up. So it sounds like you guys have done a little bit of reading to get ready for class, and that's fantastic. The book covers some of the same things, but of course it presents it in a different way. And I think it's good to read as well as to hear me speak. And plus, I'd like to hear feedback about your text if you've got any for me. I think it's a good book. I think it's relatively easy to read. I think it's fairly entertaining, even in the way it's presented with the different media that are used in it. So these slides I put in here from this. These are actually the key concepts that come out of the textbook reading. And so, for example, I will talk about the difference between relative time and absolute time today. I will talk about these. Oh, actually, I made it. I couldn't decide. I couldn't find out if Steno came up with the sixth one, which is the cross-cutting relationships. So I decided to just give him a sixth. But I won't talk about, I'm not going to have you list the 4 key isotope systems that are used in dating. Yeah, if you learn a couple, that'll be great. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about carbon-14 dating. Let's see. I'm not going to talk about natural selection and evolution really, except that we will talk about different sorts of organisms, animals and plants that were prominent in different geologic periods. But I'm not, sorry, that ding just totally caught me off guard. What was I saying? Oh, talking about the organisms. So I'll talk about those. I'm going to talk about some extinction events that did away with some of those organisms, like the dinosaurs. But I'm not going to go into all of that. And, I'm going to show you the geologic time scale, but we're not going to go over the names of the different units in any great detail. Because unless you're a geology major, or earth sciences major, I think just learning a few periods in time to understand some key concepts of this lecture, that'll be great. So I summarize my lecture in this slide. So just to make that clear, and I'm trying to do this in every slide set that I'm putting out for you, just so that you know, I don't know, kind of where to find everything. And so you know what to expect, and when you open it up, whether you've got the right set of slides. So we're going to go basically through and talk about different principles that allow us to figure out when different events happened on Earth in geologic time. And like I said, I'll put organisms to that. I'll give you some details of relative age dating methods, and that's what your lab is all about. We're going to talk about what an isotope is and radioactive decay, a few of the radiometric age dating methods. The main extinction event is the Chicxulub meteorite impact that happened at the, oh, I wrote KT, which is not really fair to you. That should be Cretaceous, oops, tertiary boundary, and it's abbreviated KT. And then, yeah, we'll look at all this. Okay. So here is the geologic time scale, and it gets updated on a fairly regular basis. This is the latest version. It says version 4 on it. I think that is when they started messing around with some more recent time periods closer to modern day in terms of renaming and what we're classifying things as. I don't think anything has changed in terms of the ages of when these different units are separated. Now, you can see there's a lot of information here. The 4 main periods of time are fairly important. The Precambrian, this is basically before any complex life existed on Earth. So this is very early Earth. And it's broken up into 2 different, the Archean and the Proterozoic. That's about as much as I want you to know about the Precambrian. We'll talk a few more details, but as far as like these periods here and these eras, I don't use them. I think that sedimentologists tend to go by these period names they're usually named for a location where the best example of that unit in time was found or is found. But like I said, the sedimentologists are the ones that use those. As a, I'm a petrologist. I study rocks. I'm an igneous and metamorphic petrologist. I do tectonics, I do geochemistry, I do geochronology, which is understanding the time, so radiometric dating. And I use these four designations: the Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Precambrian. And these larger units like the Paleogene, Neogene, the Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic, Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian. The Carboniferous is broken up into the Jurassic and the Triassic, and then we've got the Permian. So I said those out just so you could hear them spoken once, and you know how to read those words. I generally talk about the actual time. So as a geochronologist, I got an age of 385 million years for some rocks that I dated where Europe collided with the Siberian continent when it was still developing into Eurasia. And so 385 million years puts us in the mid-Devonian. I don't have my glasses on. I think it's mid-Devonian, not late Devonian. That's how I talk about it. I talk about early, middle, late Devonian, or early, middle, late Jurassic, or I talk about the actual age. And I think that that's probably the level that you should learn a little bit about these. For instance, Jurassic Park. All those dinosaurs, you've seen probably one of the Jurassic Park movies. At least I hope so. Apparently, those are actually Triassic dinosaurs. So they just took, I think Jurassic sounded better. So knowing something like that it's a good bit of trivia you can use. But that's sort of how I hope that you'll learn a little bit about the geologic timescale, knowing that those happened. The Paleozoic means old life. Mesozoic is middle life. Cenozoic is young life. So these are the youngest time period from I don't have my glasses. Shoot. Does that say, wait, I can recognize something. 66, I think. 66 million years. See, even I don't know. I mean, sometimes if I'm working on a particular part of the world, and I haven't, for my PhD, I was working on those rocks that were in the Ordovician Silurian Devonian time. I would learn sort of where the breaking points were in terms of the age, but yeah, it's not something I don't think that you need to remember. But the Cenozoic starts at 66 million years ago. The Mesozoic goes from 252 million years to 66 million years. And the Paleozoic from 541 million years to 252 million years. So we're going to talk about the different kinds of life that existed in the Paleozoic, that existed in the Mesozoic, including the dinosaurs, and a little bit about the Cenozoic. So you can imagine that mammals really took the reins in the Cenozoic. It was the dinosaurs that dominated in the Mesozoic. And then it was hard-shelled animals like trilobites. If you haven't heard of a trilobite, you're about to meet your new favorite bug. They're basically some of them are fantastically ornamental. You can find them sold they collect them in Morocco. They have these spectacular antennae that are still preserved and that they very carefully excavate out of the rock. I can't afford those. I just have some simple bugs. But that's the Cambrian is when the trilobites really dominated. But we'll see. We'll do that. Any questions, just kind of in general, about the geologic timescale? Okay. So by the way, these slides are already on iLearn if you wanted to download and try to take notes on anything directly. Otherwise, I hope that you are taking notes to go along with some of these slides, because I don't write out what I'm going to say on these. So if you miss a lecture, it really is valuable to listen to the lecture and to watch me present the slides, because you'll get so much more out of it than simply reading through these. Okay, biogenic sediments are sediments that contain pieces of skeletons, the shells of animals, or maybe plants. These are things that have been buried for a significant amount of time, so that the actual animal isn't there anymore. It's been replaced by minerals. It's been lithified. So those trilobites, really, it's just like it's kind of like a ghost of a trilobite that we're seeing. It's actually rock. But biogenic sediments are ones like limestone. I'm going to show you the White Cliffs of Dover in southern England that are made out of tiny shells, and I'll show you a bit of what those look like. And this is mostly, it's effectively limestone. It's calcium carbonate that those are made out of. And when those animals are deposited, you know, we're talking about a huge layer, huge deposit of billions of these tiny animals. Once fluids start infiltrating groundwater, other things, fluids start infiltrating the rocks, it takes up some of that calcium carbonate and might redeposit it elsewhere. So it gives you kind of a chemical constituent to work with when it comes to geochemistry. We'll talk more about how that works when we get to the rocks section. Chert is often made up of the shells of radiolaria. They're called, one is called a radiolarium. They are these, they're marine animals that are tiny, they're microscopic. They are made up of silica. So quartz is SiO2. I think I made this edit somewhere, because this is not, this is not correct. It is not the mineral quartz. It is primarily of silica. To be a mineral, it requires a few things, and it requires, for example, that it's completely crystalline. And when we've got biogenic sediments, that's often not the case. It's not completely crystallized into crystals of quartz. It actually stays something more like, it has a more glassy texture to it. So I'll show you pictures of those. They're all over the place in San Francisco and in the Marin Headlands if you go to the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge. Diatoms are another one of those animals. So they just live in different parts of the ocean. Peat and coal are also an example of a sedimentary unit that might come from plant material. So these are, it's bogs, so wet, marshy, boggy environments where this stuff, that's actually this is how they make whiskey, is using some of the peat to heat that process. And so you get kind of a, you guys probably aren't old enough to be drinking whiskey anyway. But anyway, that's what I know about peat. Okay, so some of those sediments are primarily made up of the skeletal material or the biogenic material. And these are some examples. And like I said, I'll show you the pictures later. Well, the chert comes up right now. Okay, so these are these red chert layers that are up across the Golden Gate. So it's different now. They've changed the way that the roads are designed on the north side of the Golden Gate Bridge. now you take your first exit. That's not the overview, not the vista point for the bridge. You go to the next one, and you cross under the highway, and you go out to the ocean side. And this is what you see. You have to park now and walk up that road for the most part. But it's just, it's lousy with all of these intricately folded, thin layers of chert. And these are the radiolaria. They usually have like spines that come off here, but they lose their spines sometimes just in the process of being deposited and becoming lithified. But you can kind of get the sense of some of these spines here. These are all different species. The species exist at different times in the geologic past. And one way we date these rocks is by looking at the correlation of which of these species was deposited along with it. And if we know from some other place in the earth, maybe that was chert buried by some basaltic lava, and it was underlain by some other lava, well, then you would have a sandwich. You would know what age the unit underneath it is, the age of the unit above it is, and then you could bracket the time of the chert. Because there's no other way to date these kinds of rocks, because you don't have the right kinds. It's not made up of the right stuff. No radioactive decay going on in these rocks, at least not enough to be measurable for dating. Let's see what else I wanted to say about this. Oh yeah, so Bernal Heights, Twin Peaks, a lot of the hills in the city are made up of this chert. So take a look the next time you drive past a hill in San Francisco. Okay, this is Montera Beach. So this is south on Highway 1 through Pacifica and to the beaches on the south end of the Devil Slide Tunnel. And they are littered with all kinds of different shells. We've got gastropods, these little snails that are curled up here, different kinds of bivalves or clams. And again, those sorts of things can be dated, because if we know when a certain organism lived, we can identify, if enough is preserved of any of these fossils, you can identify the species and then know basically when those animals were alive, and so therefore when the rock was deposited. So there are clams, oysters, snails, those are gastropods, corals. So these are things that can be found in oceans or embayments like the San Francisco Bay, sometimes lakes. These are made up of mostly calcium carbonate, just like I was talking about the chalk. Please stop me if you've got questions. I'm not paying attention to the chat. I don't see I don't even know where my chat button is right now. So flag me down with your voice, please, or wave in the window, but I can only see so many of you also. These are the White Cliffs of Dover. And so these exist on the south end of England, very close to France. So in the English Channel right there. These are marine algae. So these little bits here are preserved pieces of algae that have some hard parts that are made up of calcite. So that's the calcium carbonate again. And that's like the same thing as limestone. And these are Cretaceous. These are 150 to 65 million years old. I'm gonna start using the abbreviation capital M little a like this. If I can. My cursor's not wanting to go. All right, forget it. I won't. You'll see it later, I promise. So Cretaceous period is in the Mesozoic. So that's in the middle period. Creta comes from the word for chalk. So this is one prominent kind of marker unit in the middle period of Earth. So that was between 252 to 66 million years ago. The Mesozoic, that is. This is the end of the Mesozoic. All right. So what are fossils exactly and why are they useful? This is what I came up with. They are the remains of organisms, so that could be plant or animal, from the geologic past. They are found in clastic, I'll define that in a second, and biogenic sediments. So biogenic sediments are like the chert, the chalk, and what else did I say? Some of those limestones, the biogenic limestone. Those are the ones that are primarily made up of organic material, usually animals, or I guess the peat was another one, or coal. Clastic refers to clasts, so pieces of, you can think of like sand. Sandstone is a clastic sediment because it's made up of pieces that have been broken up from erosion or whatever other geologic processes and then deposited somewhere as chunks. It might have one of those conglomerate layers, like I mentioned, like big pieces of rocks at the bottom, sandier units at the top. That would be a clastic sediment. They give us clues about past environments. So not only are they useful, the next one being useful for relative age dating. Remember, they don't give you an exact age unless you get really lucky with a particular fossil that's really well known and has an absolute age that's been established for it. These are all relative ages. So the geologic time scale was developed before any radiometric dating could be done. This was the very early contributions of geologists, and a lot of them are, they're all from Europe. They're all from England or Europe. The ones that you read about anyway. They looked at these relationships, at the correlating fossils from one unit at one place to another unit in a different place, to learn about the time period in which those organisms lived. And it gives us something about the environment in which they lived. Was it a marine animal like a radiolarian that is found in deeper ocean water, at the bottom of the ocean? Like basically there's an ooze, a siliceous, silica meaning silicious, so made of silicon and oxygen, a siliceous ooze that is at the bottom of the water column and that sits on top of any oceanic crustal rocks, like the basalts that are there beneath. We would know that about that. So when we see the cherts in the marin headlands, what that's telling us is that those rocks used to be at the bottom of the ocean. Now they're on land and I can go put my hand on them without using scuba gear. I don't think you could get to that silicious ooze with scuba gear anyway. I think you'd need a submersible. But then we have a puzzle to solve. How did that ocean sediment get on land? And so that's where tectonics comes into play. That's next week. Okay. And I guess I'll just say also with this that, there are a lot of different kinds of environments. We might distinguish marine units from a river sediment, from a lake, from a bog, or from on land. Lots of different things that give us those clues, and including some of the parts of the animals that might be needed, like to walk on land or to swim. Those things are sometimes preserved. The hard parts of these things are often preserved. The soft parts are often not preserved. Plants, we get lucky when plants are preserved. This is basically like I said, a ghost of this fern. It's a soft organism that you have to get lucky. It has to stay undisturbed in that sediment to be preserved in that case. There has to be something that covers it and that protects it. So the process is going on where those fern fossils or any plant fossils tell you, and the rock tells you itself what kind of environment it was. If this is kind of looks like a mudstone, if this was a kind of a deeper water, more of a deep water lake environment where you've got a terrestrial fern that got deposited in a lake, and so the lake sediment, it sat there very gently, there was no wave action, and it had more sediment laid down upon that. We've got their petrified trees. This is a tree log. That's probably from the Petrified Forest, the national park, eastern Arizona. These are some shells. These are little clams. You can probably see the little ridges. This is one probably best. The little ridges that look like a clam shell that you can find today on the beach or underwater. That tells us something. The fact this is a clastic sediment, for example. How do I know? Because I can see the pieces of rock that these clams are sitting in. So this looks more of a sandy unit, a clastic unit. It's not a biogenic unit because the fossils are preserved within the sandstone. It's not primarily made up of the fossil. We also, bones are the hard parts. So the hard shells and bones are the things that get preserved more frequently. What else do I want to say? I think that's it. So, yeah, I've said all that already, so I'm going to move on. So here's a section of the geologic time scale. This goes from Precambrian, so this is before the hard parts were established, or they were just, life was just starting on Earth in the late Precambrian. The hard-shelled animals appeared at this 545 million year ago line and in the Cambrian. Let's see, so the Paleozoic goes to here. Oh, I misread. The Paleozoic goes to here, that's the Permian. This Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, this is the Mesozoic, and then the younger units. So they've crammed most of the geologic timescale onto this bar graph. Just a reminder, this is the old life, the Paleozoic, and this is the dinosaur time period. This is the time when we had active subduction of an oceanic plate beneath North America. And the granites that are in the Sierra Nevada in Yosemite, those were being formed from actual melting going on underneath the continent. And that they then rose up through the continent, and the granites actually cooled and crystallized beneath the surface, and they were exposed later after millions of years of erosion and glaciations. Those glaciers scrape the rocks clean. So you can think of the Mesozoic as being the age of the dinosaurs, so when reptiles dominated, so middle life. The older life is, includes single-celled algae, old organisms, like I said, trilobites and other hard-shelled animals like that. And then the mammals started to really dominate and grow larger through the Cenozoic. It says Quaternary. This is the Cenozoic there. These are images, cartoons. They really are an artist's rendering of what different dinosaurs look like. Fishes, I can't call those well, I suppose you could call them dinosaurs from the same time. They're large animals that no longer exist because we had this major extinction event at the KT boundary, the Cretaceous Tertiary boundary. That's this one. So the end of the Mesozoic is the end of the reign of the dinosaurs. And not all reptiles, but the large ones certainly didn't survive. There's another big extinction event that was even bigger than the KT boundary, but that happened between the Permian and the Triassic. And I'll show you more about that later. Yeah, it's later. There are actually 5. It's 4 or 5. I think it's 5 main extinction events that I'll point to over time. And this is, and every time in between, life is getting more diverse, more animals, more species are appearing. And then with the extinction events, then a lot of animals die out because they lose the environment that they were happy living in. And oftentimes, do you know what the extinction event was that killed off the dinosaurs? Does anyone know about that?
The meteorite in the Yucatan Peninsula.
Awesome. Yeah. I have some pictures to show you, but yes, this is the Salub meteorite. So there's evidence, a lot of evidence, and I'm going to show you some of that evidence because I think it's really compelling evidence that it was a really large meteorite that hit basically kind of in the Gulf of Mexico and on the Yucatan Peninsula. And that sent out a lot of debris, probably activated some volcanism, and all of that together changed the environment so much that the dinosaurs could no longer survive. Their food was cut off, light was cut off because of all of the atmospheric debris, the ash, and plus the debris that is shot up from the crust when such a large meteorite impacts it. Okay, we'll come back to that. First, the Paleozoic. So here's a trilobite. Aren't they cute? They're basically like they're a beetle or a cockroach, I suppose you could call them. So that's not so cute, but they check them out online. You'll get to like trilobites. But these bugs, and geologists do call them bugs, are found in those Cambrian rocks that I was telling you about. Fish started to evolve in the Paleozoic also, but it was primarily, hard parts of fish and the hard-shelled animals, things with exoskeletons, survived in the fossil record. Not the animals. Okay, so multicellular life. So the single-celled organisms started in the late Pre-Cambrian, and it was this multicellular, complex, hard-shelled animals with bones, also hard parts, that thrived in the Paleozoic. Okay. Okay. Between Paleozoic, Mesozoic boundary, I'm just going to jump back here real quick. Here's the Paleozoic, Mesozoic boundary, about 248 million years ago. This is when there was a big extinction event. There may have been other impacts or another impact that took place at that time. But what we have a lot of evidence for is volcanism, large tracts of volcanism. So these, what are called continental flood basalts. So basalts just pour out. Some of the biggest ones are the Siberian traps, the traps. I'm not sure where that word comes from, except that it's like this large deposit of lava. The Deccan traps in India are another major one. With that volcanism come volcanic gases. So if there's a lot of volcanism, if the volume of the volcanism in those places, I mean, it's happening at different times. The Siberian traps was happening at the beginning of the Mesozoic. The Deccan traps was happening at the end of the Mesozoic. That's another reason to think that there was volcanism around the same time as that meteorite impact in Chicxulub here. There are different kinds of, so the continental flood basalts are in red. So everywhere you see red, there is another one of these basalts that is just a huge volume of volcanic rock that was erupted. We have oceanic flood basalts in the Pacific, in the Indian Ocean. Here's the Western Pacific, some in the Atlantic, even in the Caribbean. Those are other places where those gases could be released. Rhyolites are are the opposite end. So they're lighter colored, less dense, more continental-like material. But the rhyolite is the name for the lava. Not, instead of granite, it's rhyolite. Granite cools and crystallizes underground. The lava is erupted on the surface of the earth. The rhyolite is erupted on the surface of the earth. And those tend to be explosive and have a lot of gases associated with them too. So this is kind of a map, and I don't have ages for all of these, but this is kind of a map of all of those locations that may have contributed to these extinction events. So we're talking about like carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, sulfuric acid, which turns into sulfur dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas. Those other ones are greenhouse gases. All of that contributes to a change in environment. And again, you lose the food source for an animal, and it can't survive without the food source. And so that's tied to those extinction events. Here are the 5. Okay, it was 5. All right, so I'll just briefly explain. Okay, so let me just show you how the diagram works. All right, the extinction events are numbered here, 1 through 5. And these numbers in circles represent how much of that life was extinguished at that time. So 95% of these animals went extinct at this Permian-Triassic boundary 252 million years ago. That's huge. That is by far the largest extinction event. The one that we know most about is probably this one, the Chicxulub event around 66 million years. That's at the Cretaceous Tertiary boundary. Paleogene is simply the name of the smaller subunit of time in the Tertiary. So that wiped out the dinosaurs. There was another one at the Triassic period. So the Triassic is the first period within the Mesozoic. Jurassic's the next one, then Cretaceous. So at the Jurassic, we lost some of the dinosaurs, those earlier species. And this is still in debate. And what exactly caused this? Was it volcanic eruptions? Was it meteorite impacts? We still don't know the answer. Ongoing research. The Permian-Triassic, this largest extinction event, was probably similar to the Chicxulub event that wiped out the dinosaurs. Same meteorite impact, intense volcanic activity. I showed you the Siberian traps are dated at 252 million years. So that could similar to the Deccan traps in India, those two volcanic periods, along with impacts from large meteorites, can trigger these extinction events. Okay, the 2 earlier ones at the Ordovician Silurian. Okay, so remember that the Cambrian starts at 545 million. I think it's 545 or 525. I think it's 545. 545 million years ago. That's when the hard-shelled animals started to form, when the trilobites existed. Okay, this extinction wiped out some of those species. This is 60 to 70% of the species that were present. And the cause here was probably a major ice age that corresponded to some sea level drop. And so some animals would have, some things would die off in the coastal regions where sea level drops and they lose the seawater that they once lived in, especially if they're stuck in place and they can't move. They don't walk, they grow on a rock, for example, like a barnacle. So that probably triggered that one. This one, 375, 360 million years in the late Devonian. This is an event that killed off a lot of corals. And this is probably related to a drop in oxygen levels across Earth. I don't know what triggered that. and I'm not sure that it's well understood. But these are the current ideas, the best working hypothesis that we've got going. We have a lot of evidence for the Permian-Triassic boundary, that extinction, and for the Chicxulub extinction at 66 million years. So I'll show you some of the Chicxulub anyway. Okay, let's talk about the Mesozoic. So we just talked about the Paleozoic a little bit, looked at some of those bugs. The Mesozoic is the time of the dinosaurs. And a lot of the plants that we, you know, some ferns that existed then still exist today. The ginkgo plant existed then, still exists today. Magnolias and other related animals or related species to what exists today. They've just evolved since then. So birds, for example, evolved from the dinosaurs. And in fact, some of the first, oh, you read that article, didn't you, about feathers on dinosaurs, the very first week. That's fantastic. Okay, so that's with the discovery of an actual fossil showing what looks like a feather imprint. That's great evidence for an idea that had been simmering for quite some time, that dinosaurs, because they have similar parts to birds as today. Okay. The KT boundary, so this is the meteorite impact that led to that 65 million year extinction event that killed off the dinosaurs. It hit in the Gulf of Mexico, or what is currently the Gulf of Mexico. There's still, this had an immediate impact on life on Earth. There were probably hurricane force winds that spread across North and South America, at least like the southern part of North America and the northern part of South America. Those places around the Yucatan Peninsula. There was also a lot of ejecta. So the impact ejecta are the pieces of rock and other material, pieces of meteorite, dust, whatever, that glass that was shot into the air and deposited in units around the world. So there are some distinctive characteristics to those deposits that we use today to develop this idea of the meteorite impact causing that extinction. Okay. After about 40 minutes after this, so that was the immediate aftermath. This is 40 minutes later. The continents don't look exactly the same as now, but this is the impact site. There are fires that start. There is ash that is deposited on all over the place. So a week later, Earth may have looked something like this, with a lot of dead trees that were either died in fires, were knocked down by those gale force winds, or died because they were starved of oxygen because of the ash that was deposited. A year later, life is resuming. And we see after volcanic eruptions today around active volcanoes, even after major eruptions, just after a few years, you see, even after 1 year, you see life starting to come back, and particularly plants and smaller animals. You know, burrowing things may have survived very well in this kind of environment, but the dinosaurs did not. These are the two guys that worked on it, Walter and Luis Alvarez. This is them looking at the KT boundary right here in Italy. But they were scientists at Cal, at UC Berkeley. And it was the father, Luis, is that Walter? I'm trying to remember which one's which, Walter or Lewis, I can't remember. This might be Walter. I think I left it in order of the way they were standing. So Walter is the father, and this is his son. They discovered this Iridium Anomaly in the sediments that formed along that Cretaceous tertiary boundary. And iridium is an element that is not very abundant on Earth, meaning that it had to be an extraterrestrial source of iridium that was provided during this meteorite impact. So the Iridium Anomaly said, aha, that has to be extraterrestrial, there must have been an impact. And this is showing in parts per billion, but the usual amount of iridium on Earth looks next to zero. But there are these huge spikes in iridium at this layer. So that is, and you can see that it within, this is 20 centimeters above the KT boundary. So within the sediments laid down at the time of the impact and following in the short time afterwards. So this is really a rather, even though it's 40 years ago, 1980, this is a really newish idea. And why is it so new? Why is geology, a lot of geology, so recent, like plate tectonics? Partly it's because we didn't have the ability to do the geochemical analysis or to do the radiometric dating of these rocks. So we couldn't analyze for iridium in a concentration that is parts per billion. That's really tiny concentration, right? If we were to plot this on sort of the contents of our drinking water, it would be barely a blip compared to a lot of the, like the chlorine and whatever else, the fluoride that's in our water. The fluoride is in parts per million, not parts per billion. So this is really a small amount. So it took some advanced equipment in order to detect that. Here is a close-up of that KT boundary, and you see this very fine clay layer that is at the time of the impact. Here's this is a magnified part of that, and this is impact debris. So there's clay that was laid down, so very fine material, like ash-sized particles, tiny particles that were laid down. And there are also evidence of melt fragments. So there are these, I'll show you them in the next slide, little blobs of actual melted rock that were deposited, that it happened because the impact hit Earth, and it was so fast, and there was such great force that it melted the rock. So that must mean that it got up to, let's say, 800 degrees Celsius, really hot, to melt some of this material. Maybe not that hot, but it could have been that hot, you know, hence the fires too. But these melt spherules were thrown out into the atmosphere and deposited. You saw in that that earlier image, I'll just go back to it quickly. These are some of the impact ejecta. So there might have been melt spherules as far away as that. And also shocked quartz. So shocked quartz is, it's just the mineral quartz, which people are familiar with. You're usually, you know, you've seen those nice prisms of quartz that you, I don't, yeah, that people say are good for your health and all sort of stuff like that, which I don't believe in. There's a microscopic texture that the quartz takes on when it was hit with such great pressures of that impact. So it has, under the microscope, when we look at these rocks, it looks different, and it's because of the great pressure of that impact. Okay, let me come here. Here's some of those melt spherules, and this is the shocked quartz. So quartz, it usually doesn't have this stripy nature to it. That is, I suppose that's the best way I can describe what I'm seeing there. But you see these sort of, this layering that looks like, that's what I'm talking about, a texture. That's not what typical quartz looks like. And so seeing this texture in the quartz grains tells you that there was a meteorite impact in the rocks at the surface or very near the surface where that quartz is taken. Some of that could have also been ejected. It could have been like impacted and shot back out too, just like the melt spherules. These are from Haiti. These would show up. Okay, this is an impact breccia. So a breccia is, it's a rock that you can find in fault zones too. It's where you break rock brittly and it forms these larger jagged pieces. You can imagine if you smashed a rock with a hammer, you get all these like random, jaggedy, sharp pointed pieces that come off of it. Well, put that in a pile, lay it down, fill it with some other sedimentary debris, and you end up with a breccia. It's similar to a conglomerate, like I was talking about earlier. Conglomerate being like those larger pieces of rock that get laid down earlier in a or at the bottom of a river compared to what's carried along the surface of the river. So large pieces, but in this case they're broken, and it tells us something broke that rock, and it's the meteorite. There's also this, and I'm not sure I realized that. I knew that there was a topographic expression of the actual asteroid impact that was kind of a roundish zone here. I didn't realize that there were a ring of cenotes in that area. If you've ever been to the Yucatan Peninsula, you might have gone snorkeling or swimming in a cenote. It's basically where groundwater, sometimes seawater, depending on how close to the ocean you are. There are these caves, or I mean, they're caves, or sometimes they're openings that it's a big hole where maybe the limestone roof dropped through. I think I mentioned those before. I can't remember in what context, but anyway, so this ring of these caves that are now filled with water, this is what one looks like, one of these that opens up to the surface. So they're pretty steep-sided, it's like a collapsed structure. So there was an opening beneath it, the rock was eaten away by probably like acidic rainwater or groundwater, and then the roof collapsed, leaving this like open pool. And you should go check them out. If you've never been to the Yucatan Peninsula, you should find a reason to go. There are also a lot of like ancient pyramids and things that like cultural stuff that's really cool on the Yucatan. Anyway, okay, so this is some of the direct evidence, the stuff that you can see easily, not like the Iridium Anomaly, but these are pieces of evidence that impact took place there. And I don't think I included, no, I didn't include a slide. There's a big National Science Foundation project where they're drilling through the actual impact site to look for evidence in the deeper rock. So it's still ongoing, and that was active, let's say 10 years ago. That's about right. So it's not that old, this research. Okay. It's still ongoing, because we had a guy, so associated with UC Berkeley is something called the Berkeley Geochronology Center. And you would never know they existed, except they're, kind of a side associated with the university, but they're kind of their own research foundation. And Paul Rennie, who has been there a very long time, now works on this impact material and works on those rocks that have the Iridium Anomaly. Okay, what else happened in the Mesozoic? Actually, this is the Cenozoic. So in the Cenozoic, so after that extinction event, we lost the dinosaurs. Wait, I skipped a slide. Sorry. I thought it was funny that I hadn't introduced the Cenozoic yet. So Cenozoic, new life. This is the younger period of time that starts right after that extinction event, so 66 million years ago. This is when Mammals really ruled the earth. We had bats, we had horses. There were still lots of insects. And the first human-like organisms existed. So you actually see footprints there that are, these are also fossils too. It's just an imprint that's left behind rather than an actual organism that was replaced. So we find that, oh, and there were some, not just few years ago, they found a huge tract of, just while we're on footprints, this is the Mesozoic that I'm going to mention. They found a huge tract of dinosaur footprints, like tracks like that look like that, but dinosaurs in England, somewhere in the UK. Maybe it wasn't England. It might have been Scotland. I don't know, but it was somewhere over there in the islands with England, and maybe it was Ireland. You know what I mean? Over there. Lots of discoveries all the time, and we're finding more and more now that people know what to look for in a lot of these situations. We find there are new discoveries being made all the time, is what I'm trying to say. Okay. Maybe you are from LA or visited the La Brea tar pits in West LA. This is something that happens. So just to expand on the mammals thriving in the Cenozoic, we had like these giant sloths, we had saber-toothed tigers, we had woolly mammoths. These are the mammoths. These are, I think they're in the middle, based on their website, they're still in the middle of a giant renovation of this park and the center that goes along next to the tar pits. But there's actual tar, and there's still gas being released under these tar pits. And this is natural. These animals got stuck in it and couldn't get out, and they died in the tar. And it was a good preservative because those animals, and this is pretty young, so this is like 40 to 25,000 years ago. This should be the other way around. Should list the older time first, because we're talking about coming to today. So 40 to 25,000 years ago, these animals existed. So it's that whole span of time from like early hominids and just small mammals, small horses, to these giant woolly mammoths and giant sloths and giant versions of a lot of animals that we have today. Any questions so far? Today is going to be kind of just like, I'm going to go through a lot of this because I want to get to the parts where you know, understand the stratigraphy well enough to do your lab. And then I'm going to finish off these slides on Thursday. It won't be a lot. And then we'll work on the lab or some different examples of the lab so that you're able to complete the more complicated versions of those puzzles. But I hope you've started it, and I hope you're finding it fun. If you haven't started the lab though, today's good preparation to start tonight or do it tomorrow. Just a little, you know, if you got into the simpler ones done and waited for the more complicated ones for Thursday to ask questions, that would work really well. But you might find that you can do the whole thing on your own without my help. Okay.
I actually have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You said that in the Cenozoic era that mammals had expanded, and including our own species. So do you mean the human species, or like what did you mean?
Early hominids, not Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens are much later. The very early hominids existed at the time of these guys, of the woolly mammoths and all that, but not Homo sapiens until about 14,000 years ago. I need to double check that time, but if you Googled like first Homo sapien, you probably find the answer. Maybe you can do that now, one of you. But it's later than this. Was there another part of your question?
Oh, no, that's
That
all.
was it?
Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome. Okay, so
Actually.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I heard somebody
So
say,
when I was, yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I was taking quiz 2, I think a few days ago, I was the one that emailed you about the quiz, but I noticed that some of the questions are kind of like what we're going over now, like just a few of them.
Yeah.
So do the quizzes always match up like identically to like the chapter that we're on?
It's the chapter, yes. The
Okay.
and I said this in one response to an email, but the quizzes, you will notice a distinct similarity to the quiz questions in the online textbook, because that's where I got them. So if you were to read your textbook and to try those quizzes as you go, you would be ready to like do really well on those quizzes on the first shot. And then you could take it a second time and knock it out pretty fast, I think.
Much. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that helps everybody, because I was hoping you would discover that for yourselves, and I'm pretty sure some of you already have. Yes, those are taken from the textbook. I am not into memorization, unless it's like a really important geologic thing that I need you to remember a name of, like Mesozoic. That's a pretty important age, era. So knowing those Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Precambrian, those sorts of designations, knowing that the dinosaurs lived in the Mesozoic, that the mammals thrived in the Cenozoic, that's about as much, that kind of detail. I don't expect you to know species names or anything like that. Not necessarily, I mean, if you could give me a roundabout age, like if you could give me a number in the middle of the Mesozoic, I'd be pretty happy. If you said like 100 million years, I'd say that's great. That's Mesozoic time. And if you said 500 million years and said that was Paleozoic, that would be great. That kind of detail. So I suppose knowing those major extinction events would help you kind of, if you knew what died out and what started to thrive, the organisms that thrived at those different times, that would be good for your exam. Oh, I didn't even talk about this yet. Okay, so we've been talking about looking at animals, life forms, and when they existed. And I already mentioned that you correlate sedimentary layers as an example to establish the order in which these animals lived. Like we know that the trilobites were in the really old rocks, not the oldest, but really old rocks. And that the dinosaurs came much later, much higher up in that stratigraphic column. Here's an example of, one place, it could be in England, let's say. And let's say this place over here is in France, across the English Channel. You might see very similar rocks in both places because whatever was, when sea level was lower, there was probably, deposition of similar kind of material in both places. And I'm talking about older, current time, but this is much older. But the animals that existed back then, you could correlate. I find trilobites in this unit and I find trilobites in that unit. Those must be the same unit that I'm finding in two different places. And then you can kind of say, well, it's trilobites, so those are really old. I know I got to put that's got to be older than these fishes up here. That kind of fossil correlation is important in terms of establishing just the order of existence. We didn't know the numbers. We couldn't attach the age, like 66 million years, until we got the radiometric dating, until we got that really sensitive equipment, the mass spectrometers. Mass spectrometers they use the mass of the isotope. So you would literally, you guys are probably familiar with carbon-12, and there are two other isotopes, carbon-13 and carbon-14. That's one dating method for very young things. Well, a mass spectrometer would be able to, it uses a magnet to actually spread out those isotopes by mass, because they have a different number of neutrons. They have a different mass each. And so you can count them in different physical places within the mass spectrometer, and then you know how much carbon-12 you've got, how much carbon-13 you've got, how much carbon-14 you've got. And that allows you to actually calculate an age for whatever unit you're trying to date. Now, carbon dating, though, is one you've probably run across before. It requires biologic material. You've got to have like charcoal, like a burnt tree or an actual tree or plant material or something that was living, because anything that's living has, we know the ratio of those different isotopes in modern day. So all of us, as long as we're breathing, we have the same ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-13 to carbon-14 in our bodies that exist in the atmosphere. That's one of the assumptions that we make when we do this dating. So as long as it was alive, it was exchanging with the atmosphere. And then we can look at the changes from what we know about those ratios in the atmosphere to what we get out of the rock to get an age. That's kind of a simple way of explaining it. Does that kind of make sense? I'm going to assume unless you speak up. Okay, so the relative age dating is just the order of events and order of organisms being alive. The radiometric dating techniques is what gives us the numbers that we attach to those different units. Okay, that's also called absolute dating. That's an absolute dating method because it gives us an actual age, an absolute age, rather than it's older than that, which is relative. This is relatively older compared to that. That's relatively younger, that kind of idea. All right, in the last 15 minutes of class, and I know I've done a lot of talking today. I didn't really mean to talk straight through, but here we are. We're going to get it. We're going to talk about these different principles, that stratigraphic principles that allow us to do the relative dating, and then we'll let you do your lab. So here is an example of lateral continuity. So maybe this wasn't the easiest one to start with. I should have probably started with, sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the sequential order of deposition. Someone help me out.
Original horizontality?
Well, that's another one. So these sedimentary layers, or anything that was deposited on Earth, like a lava or a sediment, was originally horizontal or close to it. It might fill in some gullies or whatever, but generally horizontal thing. Now there's another one. Here, I'm just going to go take a peek at because I'm blanking. Original horizontality, superposition. Superposition is the one that tells you, okay, you got the oldest unit is at the bottom, and that subsequent layers are younger as you go up in that column. The sort of original horizontality, superposition, and lateral continuity all kind of go together, because those, if we just think of like sandstones, limestones, maybe some lavas to keep it simple, the superposition tells you oldest things on the bottom, youngest things on top. Original horizontality means should be originally horizontal. And then lateral continuity gets us to this slide. So I'm going to go back to the slide here. This one. Okay, so I know this is a bit small, but this is the Grand Canyon here on this map. We've got a cross section of the crust. And the different colored units are different, kind of famous, like the Navajo Sandstone is a famous sandstone because it's nice and bright red. It's very thick, it's distinct, and you can find it in a lot of places. For example, you find the Navajo Sandstone in Bryce Canyon, that's here. You find the Navajo Sandstone in, this is Zion, Zion's here. And then you find the Navajo Sandstone in, or maybe it's not in the Grand Canyon. It's not, it's younger. Okay, so or maybe, no, that's not it. No, it doesn't have, okay, so I think it's probably this unit right there, the Navajo Sandstone, that red unit. You can find it in that canyon in Zion, but it's younger than what is exposed in the Grand Canyon. So the Grand Canyon has the Colorado River has cut out and eroded a channel that is in older rocks than those other canyons. But these are some famous localities. The Painted Desert, these are all national parks too. Grand Canyon, Painted Desert, Zion, Bryce. These places on this plateau where the rivers have incised down through the rocks, and where some of the earliest geologists in North America started establishing, John Wesley Powell, who I'll show you in a moment, was the first to discover, or to really look at the order of the units and the geologic relationships of the units in the Grand Canyon back in the late 1800s. Okay, so this is all out in like Utah, Arizona, that kind of area that these parks are. So lateral continuity says those sediments that are laid down, well, they extend out in many directions. And so you can find them in different localities, particularly if they record a large period of time. If there's a really thick unit like the Navajo Sandstone, it's going to be more likely to be preserved in a lot of different localities because it was deposited over a long period of time. So that's a terrestrial sandstone. So this is like on land, not a marine sandstone. Hence its red color, because it was oxidized with the oxygen in the atmosphere. Just a little side note. Okay. I don't remember why I wanted to put this one in here. I'm going to skip it for now. But this one kind of, I should have just put it in a different place. This one talks about, or graphically shows you what animals were prominent in these different eras. So very early single-celled life in the Archean. It becomes multicellular, but nothing complicated, no hard-shelled animals in the Proterozoic. Then we get in the Cambrian, that's the explosion of life. I think they even call it the Cambrian explosion of hard-shelled animals that are preserved. It may have seemed like an explosion too, because there are more things preserved that have hard shells. And then it goes up through the Paleozoic into the age of the dinosaurs. So this is the ancient life there. The middle life, the dinosaurs, and early life, the mammals. Okay, so a few things are, you know what? I'm going to skip the radiometric dating and come back to that on Thursday, because I want to get to the other principles of stratigraphy before I let you go today. So I'm going to skip to, I got to take a peek here. I'm going to talk about those later. Oops, I did this one at the beginning with everybody. There's another principle that, well, here, I'll skip here. Okay, so one of the other principles of relative dating is the relationship of cross-cutting units or cross-cutting features. So this basaltic dike, for example, came from some magma source deep in the earth, and it was erupted onto the surface, and what is preserved is just kind of like the feeder dike, like how the melt got to the surface. And it cut through a limestone layer, a shale layer, basalt, shale, sandstone, and more shale. The idea is that any feature like a dike, like a fault, that cuts across a unit must be younger than that unit, because because those other units had to be there before anything could cut across it. So that's an important one. You can establish the relative age of these units. They're all horizontal, so there's nothing funky, no funky tectonics going on, no tilting, no folding or anything like that. They're horizontal, they're laterally continuous. And so we're just using the principle of superposition to say that's oldest, that's next, here, that's next, that's dated, because we can date a lava, 25 million years. That's younger, and that's the youngest, except for the dike, which is 20 million years old. And so that's the youngest of all. So these units here, this shale, that sandstone, that shale, have to be what age? Put some numbers on it. A range. I'm not looking for one number. I'm looking for a range.
Between 20 and 25 million years.
Yep, that's exactly. Oh, I guess it kind of says that in the red box. I called it.
I didn't even notice that. I didn't notice that.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm not saying that you did. I was just looking at the diagram. Yes, exactly. So we can constrain, that word is used a lot in geology, constrain, like you know what's beneath it, you know what's above it. So the 25 million year old lava is older than these, and the 20 million year old lava is younger. So these have to be deposited within that 5 million year window, which is a long time. Geology wise, geologic time scale, that's not a lot of time. But you know, on human scale, yeah, it's a whole bunch of time. Okay, now let me move to, I gotta take a peek at this one. Yeah, we'll wait for that one too. Okay, so we've talked about superposition, original horizontality. Lateral continuity, cross-cutting relationships. Faunal succession, I've already talked about. So faunal succession means the flora are the animals, the fauna are the flora are the plants, the fauna are the animals. Faunal succession means, like we've been talking about, like those trilobites are maybe 520 million years old. Fishes have to be younger than that. And so the faunal succession, that we know that the trilobites died out at the end of the Cambrian. So if we're looking at trilobites, it has to be in that unit. And then if we're looking at fishes, well, it's got to come after trilobites because they're a more advanced organism, that kind of thing. The last one, this principle of inclusions. I'm not sure you have any puzzles that have this sort of principle applied, but if this sandstone, let's say this red unit here, had ripped up with it a piece of basalt as it was being deposited, like a piece of basalt fell into a river, and these are river sediments, and it tumbled along in the river for a while and finally got deposited, and there's a big hunk of basalt in it now. Okay, that's an inclusion. That's what I'm talking about. It might be something like that. They're called xenoliths, meaning a foreign rock, like xenophobe, but xenolith, lith is rock, xeno is foreign. So if you've got an inclusion of another rock, does that make it older or younger than the unit that it's in? I'm just gonna keep my pointer there. That's your basalt, chunk of basalt. Is that younger or older than that red sandstone unit?
Is it older because the other rock formed around it?
Well, it's older, yes, because the other rock had to have been formed already for it to be picked up by the unit that it's in. So that could apply to a volcanic rock. For example, the basalts in Hawaii, sometimes they pick up those green mantle rocks with it, those xenoliths. I know I've mentioned that. So those xenoliths get picked up by the basalt and then deposited with the basalt. Well, the basalt is newer than the xenolith because the xenolith had the green rock that's in it that represents the mantle had to have been there for the basalt to pick it up and deposit it on the surface. That's the idea. I hope that's clear. But like I said, I'm not sure that comes up in your in your problem sets. Okay, so original horizontality, we've covered that one, and this is just a nice example of different strata being laid down. I see I'm almost out of time. I just want to point out, Steno was alive in the 1600s, so relative dating has been going on, and these principles that we use today, that's been going on for a really long time. So it really wasn't until the 1900s that we were able to, that we had the instrumentation to put date, an actual number, age on these rocks. Now, the other thing, the last thing that I'll say is about tectonism. So, or two more things. Give me two or 3 minutes, and then I'll finish. But of course, I'm going to be here until 12:30, so you can stick around and ask questions, and I can show you more if you like. But I'll finish for everybody in a couple minutes. Okay, so if we apply the principle of original horizontality to these units, and you can see there's a stripe in there. Those are the sedimentary beds that we're looking at. That was horizontal. So what happened to it? Probably, you're getting tilting, and oftentimes you'll get folding. Do I have a picture? I don't have a picture of folds right now. There were folds in the church though, the folding. That comes from tectonism. So from faulting, from compression or extension, or it's from the plates or the immediate rock around it applying a stress to the rock and then getting a result like tilting layers. This is probably bound by a couple of faults, and these rocks were tilted up during a compressional event, during mountain building, something like that. That had to have happened after the rocks were laid down horizontally originally. So you get this, we've got a sedimentary layer laid down horizontally, then superposition tells us this purple unit is younger, and then we have uplift, and then maybe the erosion applies here. We have uplift, so that might be uplift during compression. So we're imagining continents colliding or something happening, maybe a subduction zone, and there's a compressional effect where there are stresses that are applied to these rocks, and it tilts up the layers. That has to happen after the rocks are deposited. And then after erosion happens, you flatten that all out, and what are you left with but some tilted layers? Not all of it, I mean, you've lost a bit. But that's the idea of the tectonism. This might apply to folding too. Okay, so consider that there might be folds or tilting of different units, and up is not always up either. Sometimes units can be upside down. So some cases you need to know which way is up. I don't think your problems get that complex though. The last thing I'm going to mention are unconformities. Unconformities in general, happens to be an angular unconformity, but we'll get to that. Unconformities are a missing period of time. And whatever they look like, an unconformity means there were rocks that were laid down or rocks that were pre-existing, erosion happened, or sediment wasn't deposited, or both. And so there's a missing period of time. And then another unit was deposited on top. So in this example, you see tilted layers. So the first thing in these layers to have happened were they were deposited. Here's the oldest one. There's the youngest one. Originally, they were horizontal. So after they were deposited, they had to experience tectonism to be tilted. And then we see horizontal layers on top. And here's a really nice example. Tilted shales here. And then they end, and then there are horizontal layers above that. This is an unconformity. It's a missing period of time because we've done the tilting, and then there was an erosional event. We're missing the tops of these, and some other rock is deposited on top. So you would count from oldest to youngest here, but you should be taught, it would be best if you think about any erosion or tectonism that's happening to those units to explain the block diagrams that you got. And then this would be the oldest of the uppermost units, and they get younger here. But this squiggly line indicates missing time or erosion. Here's another example. This is when in the 1700s, when James Hutton was around, he found this in Scotland or sketched it. And it's a similar kind of thing. Here are these tilted layers. Sorry, I was gonna ask you where the unconformity was, but oh well, I've given it away. Maybe you saw it anyway. And then there are these horizontal layers that are laid down on top right here. So the unconformity, it looks like it comes around here, like that. And then these layers were laid down. And then the whole package was tilted, actually. Again, because these aren't exactly horizontal, are they? So in this diagram, the units are, well, the beds of those, they're gray wackies. They're a dirty sandstone, other stuff besides quartz grains in there. And then this other sedimentary unit, there's a basal conglomerate. So this might have been an erosive, you know, when things are deposited, sometimes during the process of deposition, they erode things. So it could be an erosive feature that we're seeing to explain this unconformity. And then we've got some coarse rocky material at the bottom and then finer sands on top. And then the last thing to happen was the whole package was tilted a little bit. Any questions about any of those? Oh, here's a fold. So these are the cherts from in the Marin Headlands again, and I wanted to just show you the folds. This probably happened when the rocks were pushed up onto the coast, the edge of North America. Because remember, these represent ocean floor sediments, seafloor sediments. So they were originally horizontal, and then there had to be some tectonism to cause this folding. And that's really, I'll leave you with this diagram, just to show some different kinds of unconformities. I showed you some real life examples of angular unconformities. So these two units tilted, and then the unconformity is here. And then another unit deposited on top. This one has inclusions in it. So the oldest unit in this example is the you tell me, is it the pink or the black unit? Which came first? We'll just test this principle of inclusions before you go. If anyone has to leave, please feel free. You gotta go, you gotta go. But if you can stick around, tell me if the pink or the black unit is older.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that.
Area?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that again. My email. So
it was the pink.
the pink. Why do you say the pink?
Because of how we just because like earlier when we discussed those other layers, like how the molten lava came through the other layers. The other layers came first, but then the lava was like came afterwards because it was like coming through it. So the pink seems like it came first, but then the black is like right on top of it.
Okay, so this is probably erosive. So we're seeing the top of the sand. So I imagine this is an intrusion, the black stuff. We could call it basalt because basalt is blackish. It probably intruded a larger area, and there's an erosive event. It scraped off the pink stuff, and we can see the black basalt underneath. But if you apply the principle of inclusions, I said the inclusions have to be older than the unit they're in, because they can't be included in something unless it already existed. So it's got to pick up. So in this case, the basalt plucked off some pieces of this pink unit when it intruded. And so there are pieces of the pink unit in the black unit. Black unit came after. Pink unit had to be there. And then we had an intrusion of some magma, some molten rock. It picked up some of these inclusions. You can call them xenoliths. And that happened after the pink rock was there. And then in this case, erosion took place after that. This is another kind of unconformity. It's a non-conformity, just an erosive, it's just a missing chunk of time after erosion. Okay. So I don't mind, as long as you understand unconformity. I don't care if you learn angular unconformity, disconformity, nonconformity. That doesn't matter to me. I just want you to understand what an unconformity is. And that should give you all the tools that you need to finish your lab, hopefully. I know some of them get pretty complicated, but take your time, work in pencil so you can erase. Are there any questions about the slides today? I'll save the rest for Thursday and we'll work on the lab on Thursday.
I kind of do. So would you say that the slides are the best reference to go to when we're completing the lab, like on our own? Because I know that I tried to do that with the last lab and I still kind of had some unfinished questions.
Are you talking about the fossils lab, or are you talking about this one?
The fossils one, yeah.
Okay.
The previous lab too.
I give you information in the lectures, and you have this similar information in your textbook. So you could come to the lecture slides to help with the lab, except that unless it's my recording where I'm explaining something, just looking at the slides won't necessarily help you. But the text is written out. So you could go and read through that and there's an explanation. It's another way of explaining it. Maybe it's clearer than how I've explained it. I stumble on my words. So you could go back to the text. You could come here. And also, I hope that you're given enough information in the material of the lab itself, in the worksheets at the beginning, to actually do the lab. So read the first part of it. And if it refers you to another site, I would go to those sites and look, because those will help.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so for the fossils lab, you should make sure you watch the video of Lisa White looking at the fossils, and make sure you do the virtual field trip. And those will help you do those labs. And I also talk about it in one of the lab recordings or one of the lecture recordings. I say so in the title. So just go through those folders on iLearn and find the one that I'm talking about, fossils. And hopefully you'll find your answer there too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I could even, actually, let me stop sharing and I could show you on iLearn. If I can figure out how to get out of this. Okay, come on. Here we go. Stop. Okay, let me pull up iLearn. That's not iLearn. Okay, so let me just share this real quick. Okay. Oh, that doesn't look like it went. Let me try that again. Here we go. Okay, so in lab, let's see, lab 2, Earth history, where's the lab 3, fossils? Okay, oops, shoot. Lab, where were we? Lab 3, exploring fossils. Study, okay, so there was a study group in which I answered some questions on the exploring fossils. There's also, yes, including an intro to the lab on exploring fossils. So I talk about it here and I talk about it here. These are all the things you need to do the lab, but if you need extra explanations, this is where you go. So that was all in the Lab 3 folder. That's what I'm doing with all of these like supplementary material. I'm putting any extra files or links back into those lab or lecture folders. Like if I talk about something different during lecture, I might put a resource into the lecture folder to supplement what we did, and ditto with the labs. So any recordings that I'm discussing the labs, explaining how to answer the questions or something, I would go to those recordings and, you know, go to the point in the recording that I explain it. I am now starting to collect the transcripts of the recordings. So if you go to the transcript, it will actually tell you where in the recording to go to. It gives you a timestamp, and then you can see when I talked about this or that. So if you needed like help with the very last question, you can go see where I start talking about it and then jump to that point in the recording. Any other questions? Oh, I see there's so many chats. I told you guys I couldn't see. Oh, you were answering some of the. Oh, someone said pink. Okay, good. Mia, that was great. Okay, cool. Any questions about the lecture, about the lab, about the reading, about the quizzes?
I actually just have a quick question about the Exploring Fossils lab. I just want to know if it's better to print it out or to do it like on the computer, on the Google Docs.
It's up to you. If you're adept enough with using Google Docs and like drawing and you know, it might be harder to do sketches with Google Docs, but you could try, because there are pencil tools in there. If you feel like doing that electronically, go for it. Or you can always print those out, do those by hand. You could take a picture and pop the picture back into the Google Doc as an image, as a JPEG or a PDF. If you know how to do that kind of thing, you kind of go find the insert menu and then go find the file that you want to insert, and then you can pop it right into the electronic document. If you end up doing things by hand though, like if you were to print the whole thing and do the whole thing by hand, I would just take pictures, unless you have a scanner. If you have a scanner, great, then put it through the scanner and just send me that file. If you have to take pictures, it'd be great if you would please compile those into a single document so that they're all in like one PDF or something. And you can just simply insert additional pages in Acrobat like that. So if you need help doing those things, let me know and I can guide you through in a video like how to do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. You can also try Googling. Googling works. When I don't know stuff, I Google it. Oh, that's one thing we should Google. First Homo sapiens, to answer that question. Ooh, wait, no. Really? 200,000 years? I was wrong. I was off. Do they really mean Homo sapiens? I thought it might have been an earlier ancestor. Huh. Well, I'll have to look more into that and give you guys a better answer. Because if so, then I misled you today in the Cenozoic, saying that early ancestors existed then, but not Homo sapiens. Certainly not in North America. We didn't get to this continent until quite a bit later. Have you two started the lab already? Is it going all right? Are you finished already? Caitlin, okay?
I was gonna work on it today.
Okay, cool. Well, it sounds like you got like the gist already, so you'll knock out the simple ones pretty quickly. Caitlin, it sounded like you were about to say something.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I started it like yesterday. It's pretty simple. It's just, getting the drawings into the lab doc itself. But I think I figured it out.
Okay. What do you mean getting? Oh, you talking about the fossils? Or are you talking about?
I'm talking about the fossils lab.
Oh, got you. I was talking about the relative dating.
Oh, no, I haven't started that one yet. But as soon as I finish the fossils one, I'll probably start on it.
Yeah, I mean, we already did some examples in the lecture today, so you'll, like with Kay, you'll probably knock those simple ones out pretty quickly.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go now. I hope you guys have a great it's Tuesday, right?
It's
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
I don't know what day it is anymore.
Yeah, I don't know what day it is anymore either.
I have to look at my calendar to find out.
Yeah. Okay, well, have a nice day.
Yeah, you too. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.